Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. In this era, Europeans began colonizing all over the globe, not just the New World. The Ottoman Empire, as well as the Portuguese and Spanish explorers, discovered and exploited the coast of Africa, parts of Middle and Eastern Asia, as well as the Americas. In 1783, the end of the American Revolutionary War saw a change in which European countries became colonizing leaders. Great Britain, France, and the Netherlands became colonizing giants, but began to relinquish their powers after the end of the Second World War. The time of colonization created havoc for the invaded lands. People were removed from ancestral lands and forcibly moved to other places in the world, sometimes into a lifetime of bondage. The people who were left behind had to deal with conquering nations who disrupted their long-established ways of life. Sometimes their food sources were decimated by overhunting and overfishing. Often their traditions were ridiculed and stripped away. Native clothing made from hides and natural elements were forcibly replaced by cotton material, which required growing cotton, which strips the nutrients from the soil, and the processes of cotton into the requisite material for clothing. Years after colonization had subsided, its effects are still rampant. And it's not over. Today, a new power has taken over where colonization left off. This new power lies in communistic enterprises and capitalistic corporations. As capitalistic corporations have been responsible for dumping noxious fumes into the atmosphere and poisons into rivers across the democratic world, so Soviet enterprises have dried up entire seas by diverting rivers for irrigating croplands, and China's enterprises are the largest greenhouse gas producers in the world. All of this equals something called climate change. Both indigenous and settler populations are losing coastal land as our seas rise from warming polar ice caps, and indigenous populations specifically are suffering from reduced natural harvesting caused by the changing climate. This is not only significant to indigenous people, though. As the Earth reels from anthropogenic climate change, she is sending out a plea for all people to do a course correction. Some of the abuse our Earth has taken will take centuries to mend, and some species driven to extinction by climate change will never recover. With this in mind, humankind has a lot to do to make things right, to stop filling the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. Although the technology is still new, carbon capture and storage or reuse is capable of reducing greenhouse gases by 80 to 90%. Because of the public outcry on climate change, many large companies are working against the clock to develop and fine-tune carbon capture as a way to reduce greenhouse gases. The U.S. Department of Energy has invested billions of dollars into this technology, but the clock is ticking, and analysts say the technology has to increase by 7,000% by 2040. Another thing that can be done legislatively is to require all new construction be built with solar panels on their rooftops to produce electricity for individual homes, apartments, as well as places of business. It takes 2.8 acres of solar panels to produce 1 gigawatt hour of electricity. At that rate, it would take 1.8 billion acres of land in the U.S. to fulfill all of the U.S.'s needs. That sounds like a lot, right? But it is only 0.6% of all the land in the U.S. That's about this much. Some experts say that if every home in the U.S. were equipped with solar panels on their roofs, that could generate about half of the energy needed to keep our country running. Another idea would be to require all single-family residences to have a windmill along with solar panels to assist with power generation, and large lithium batteries for energy storage. Lastly, indigenous tribes need to be reallocated large portions of the original lands that belonged to them before colonization, and they need to be allowed to govern these areas exclusively. Indigenous people have shown that they are better at protecting and policing their own lands, and their occupancy would bring back a healing presence to the earth. There are issues with this plan. Fossil fuel corporations would need to invest much more heavily in the new carbon capture technology. And with the advent of solar and wind power, some electrical corporations might find themselves out of business. Getting communities to release land that formerly belonged to indigenous people could be a pretty hard sell. Mining for lithium used in modern batteries is very damaging to the environment. Finally, would countries such as China, Russia, and the U.S. be on board with the same extreme measures to reduce greenhouse gases as many other countries are? Would they be willing to assist smaller countries with their technological needs so that the entire Earth could be rescued? Although the answer to this issue is not hard, the choices that must be made are. So what's at stake if we don't get proactive about protecting our mother? Only everything.